Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima. Welcome back to Blue Boards. This time we're going to be checking out Awkward Guess, the Walton case, created by Megacorpin Games. It's also got a Dice Tower Seal of Excellence on the front there, and believe me, this game deserves it. It's really damn good. So, for the purpose of demonstration, I've only set up one player here, but you can technically play with up to 8 players, each of whom get their own shield and their own note-taking pad. However, it's worth noting that you don't get that many note-taking sheets. You get a fair few, don't get me wrong, and they are double-sided, which is nice, right? But it is worth noting that you don't really get enough to play through the contents of the box, because there are 39 cases in the base box to work with. And so if you play through all of them with like 4 players, you're going to run out of sheets. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So if you plan on playing this game even relatively regularly, you're going to want to get out the laminator and some dry erase markers. It's that simple, really. So, the state of the game. Mr. Walton, the poor bastard, has found himself dead inside his own study. And visiting him at the time were 6 suspects. And the job of the players as detectives is to find out which guest did it and why, and what murder weapon they used. And the entire idea of the game is figuring that out, figuring out their weapon, figuring out the motives, finding information that will point to those motives being what is the reason that poor Mr. Walton had to die, and finding their path through the house, because the guest in particular needs to go through the room with the murder weapon and then get to the study. So let's just say, for example, the pillow is the murder weapon. So you could go from the living room to the kitchen to the bedroom to get the pillow and then use it to get to the study and kill Mr. Walton. Or you could go from the library to the living room to the vestibule to the billiard room to the trophy room to the garage to the bedroom and then to the crime scene. Or some other really complicated route like that. It's worth noting, however, that you cannot have a path that goes through the same room twice. So it's entirely possible. Just get the entire house covered. Usually doesn't happen that way, but there you go. You just need to try and figure out who the murderer is. Now, how do you do this? You use clues. And these clues are the really interesting part of the game mechanically, because you get 250 cards here, right? And these 250 cards, technically 243 of them are clues, but they include another 7 in there, so technically you do get 250 cards. These 250 cards can have pieces of evidence on them. And these pieces of evidence will disprove things or prove things or potentially catch people out in lies. So just as an example, let's go for one of the more powerful examples. After examining the body, the coroner did not find traces of a dark powder. If you look closely at the sheet here, there is a symbol here that is 3 dots, and those 3 dots are the weapon in question, and it will leave both of those behind. So you can cross off every single one of those particular weapons. It's been proven by this clue. And then you get ones which are a little bit less useful, but still potentially useful. So the housekeeper reports there were 2 people in the library at the time of the murder. So if you can figure out the 2 people who were there, maybe they'll be covering for each other. That's a piece of info that might help you out later on. Or just some more general ones, which says the pesticide was not the murder weapon. But then you can get ones that say, hey, Claudette claims that she was with Angelica. Can Angelica back that up? Cool. Maybe they can prove each other innocent, or maybe they're covering for each other. And one of them was the murderer, and one of them is the accomplice. And that's the really clever thing about the way these clue cards are designed. They have so many ways they can play around with the concept of detective work. And more than a couple of examples in the game that I played of this, literally last night, had people thinking, hey, someone's lying about something here. And they were talking out loud about how they think someone was lying about something. And the nice thing is, on top of all of this, is that not all of the clue cards are used. So if we just get the rulebook to use as an example, it has, in the back pages, some cases. And these cases tell you the exact cards to get out and the deck to make. And then you will shuffle those cards and that will create the clue deck. And every investigator will get 6 clues. And these 6 clues can get them started on their investigation, give them a few things to work with, and let them start filling in their clue sheet. But the absolutely little fantastic touch that they put on top is that this isn't a cooperative game. This is a competitive game. You want to solve the murder first. So the way it works is, you've got your hand of 6 clues, and they've all got references, right? So you can see here that card in the middle. It's 1 point and it references Greg and Stanley. And there'll also be ones that reference like certain rooms. Like for example, this one here, 2 points, and it references Mortimer and the shed. Someone on their turn, as you're going around the table, will say, hey, I want either 2 rooms, 2 guests, or 1 room and 1 guest. At which point, other players can offer up cards for trade. Let's just say that someone asked for info on the shed. So someone can say, hey, I have 2 points worth of shed references and I'm willing to give them to you for 2 points in return. And then the other player can be like, okay, 2 points worth of cards, here you go, and they exchange their cards. So they both get you clues, they can both write it down on their sheet, and it'll get them both a little bit closer to solving the mystery. But what if you don't want them to have it? Let's go back to that clue that I talked about earlier. So let's say we're a few rounds in, a lot of the stuff has been marked off, and just to give you an idea of what a fully marked off sheet looks like, let's have a look at the other side of this sheet. So you can see here that someone's got Angelica dead to rights, a lot of other people have been confirmed innocent, a bunch of routes have been crossed off, but not all the weapons have been crossed off. So let's say, for example, something comes along that can prove the majority of weapons that are left. You don't know what the other people have in their clues though, so you don't know for sure that, hey, this might actually solve the game for someone. So do I want to give this out? It's 3 points, so I can get a lot of information back if I'm willing to give this one up, but if I do, I risk giving them the win. And it creates this absolutely fantastic little mindscape where on one level, you're trying to solve the mystery, you're trying to get all the information you can, you're trying to put it all together, you found a little bit of a conundrum, someone is lying and you need to figure out who and why. And then, on top of that, you've got the clues in your hand, you've got the information you've got, you don't know how much information everyone else has, but based on the information you're handing out and the information you're getting in, you can make some guesses as towards what they've seen and what they haven't seen, and you're just thinking to yourself, if I give them this clue, will that end the game early? Because the way it works is, after everyone's had the opportunity to give out trades, or in the case of the poor bastard who didn't manage to get any trades, they just get to draw 2 cards for free from the deck. You hold out your investigator token and decide whether or not everyone reveals simultaneously. There's 8 of these. Everyone reveals simultaneously whether or not they don't want to investigate. They don't want to say who it is, or they want to say who it is. At which point they need to write down who they think it is on the who, the why, and the how on the right side of the player sheet, and find out if they're right or wrong. If they're right, they win. If they're wrong, they're out of the game. At round 3, when you've got a lot of the information figured out, all you've got left is like one little piece of information, like, okay, I know she's got like one of these 3 weapons, which one is it? But you just don't have the information to figure that out. You can't get your cards out to get more information in, and everyone else is making hints like they're going to do it. You might be tempted to just put your hand out and say, all right, I'm going to try and solve this now. And it can be really easy to bluff people into thinking that you've got more than you think and try and get them to jump the gun and try and knock themselves out of the game. It creates this absolutely fantastic mind game. So this fantastic 2-layer setup that makes all the games really interesting. I've only played 1 game of this, but even I can see just all the ways that this can go really, really well, and I'm genuinely impressed with how it can pull this off, with so many cards that need to be balanced in so many ways, and so many potential cases to go through. Time to talk about some of the other things that the game does. So, I did say there are 39 cases in the book, right? And the 39 cases you get can and will keep you occupied for a long time because they've got difficulty levels to determine how hard they are and what clues get swapped out, what ones get put in, and I imagine that the harder you get, the more just general the clues get, and you need to try and link them all together in more logical ways. But there's still only 39 cases in the book. Handcrafted, but there's still only 39 cases. It's also worth noting that you can only play the game with 2 to 8 people under normal circumstances, but of course, there's a companion app. Awkward Guess, the Walton Case. Now, under normal circumstances, I'm usually against companion apps because you can easily re-implement this in like a browser and have it work just fine and have it be more accessible for longer than any particular like version of Android or what have you. But there's a few reasons why I'm not entirely against this. The main one being you get 39 cases in the box. The second one being that this isn't a particularly heavy app, so at least a lot of phones will be able to run it. The third one being that this goes from 39 to about 3,600 cases. You can make them randomly, select the difficulty, choose to do one that you absolutely haven't done before, and it'll tell you the cards you need to set up in the same way as the regular setup. It'll let you solve them just by putting in your solution, and it'll even tell you if you failed or if you succeeded, and it'll let you see the solution. So, it's just a really easy way of getting a case set up without having to rely on the book. And it also adds a solo mode. Although the solo mode, I will admit, isn't that great. You basically just get a certain amount of points, and you can use these points in order to get cards. It'll just say, hey, take these cards and try and solve the mystery. Do you think you can solve it as fast as possible? And you just record your score at the end. It's not great, and it's missing that second layer of just social deduction where you're trying to figure out what everyone else knows and whether or not you need to solve the case now or risk losing the game entirely at the end of the round. But it's still nice that they included it. And again, as long as you don't mind only have 39 cases in the box, that's all you need. You don't even need to worry about the companion app. So at least it's playable without the companion app for a significant length of time. It is also worth noting that the game's actually got a fair few components. Now, technically, I'm playing with a Kickstarter version of this game because my friend who I borrowed this game from kickstarted it. So I've got a couple of components you won't see in the base box, mainly being this, which is like a fancy version of the first player marker, and I believe these as well, which are like standees that you put on the map to say, hey, I want information on the billiard room, and I want it on Angelica, or whatever, right? And you also get these tokens, which let you be like, hey, I'm offering a trade with you, and I'm going to give you this much. It's just like a nice little reminder. And you also have like a confidential tray here, which you use to guard the discard pile and make sure nobody can see it. And honestly, outside of like maybe using these as a reminder and using this as your first player marker, which isn't even entirely necessary if you can just remember who the first player is, you don't even need any of it. Again, the game is simple enough that you can just remember and not even need that stuff, which is nice. It's nice. It's good to have options. It's good for the game to be simple enough that you don't need to worry about those pieces. Overall, that is my opinions on Awkward Guess. It's absolutely great. Kind of let down by a lack of note-taking sheets. It's kind of annoying that it has a companion app if you want to go beyond the 39 cases, but you don't need the companion app, so that ends up being a plus as well. But the combination of the really clever forming of the cases from the 250 included cards, creating a really intense mystery where you can end up doing things like having an accomplice or not having an accomplice, having people getting into a sort of lie spiral, and you need to figure out which is right and which is wrong, and just filling out this sheet, getting all of your pieces filled in, figuring out who the murderer is through pure detective logic alone is so satisfying. And then you've got that extra added little bit of metagame on the top where you're thinking, do I want to give this clue away? It's worth a lot, it can get me a lot, but it might solve the mystery for someone else. And trying to figure out who knows what so you know when you can safely try and make for a solve or not. It's so good. It is genuinely really damn good. And I really appreciate having the opportunity to have not only played it, but borrowed the copy of this from my friend in order to get this video done for you. So thank my friend for that. And with that said, this has been Blue Maxima. I'll see you all next time.